Hi guys, this is Stan Huge. Welcome if you're new here. Are you looking for your next fantasy series to read but don't know where to begin with? Don't worry. In today's video, I'm going to tier rank every fantasy series that I have read to help you to find the next perfect starting point. From classic epic fantasy to the latest book talk sensation, we are going to deep dive to see what makes a good series opener. Is it the character, is it the plot, or is it the world building? We will rank popular series like The Wheel of Time, The Stormlight Archive, Crescent City, or some you may never heard of. Let's settle this debate. Which first book truly hooked you from the start? You can share your own tier ranking list down in the comment below. I'm very interested to see everyone's. So as you can see, we got 5 tiers here from S to D, and we already got a list of books in the bottom. First of all, we have some Brandon Sanderson book, The Way of King, first book of the Stormlight Archive. An epic fantasy where ancient magic, colossal storms, and political intrigue collide. We're gonna follow a slave turned soldier, a troubled scholar, and a noble warrior who want to save his people. It has actually been some time since I last checked out this series, especially for the first book. I think it has been at least 5 years. And I think it is also the very first fantasy book that got over 1,000 pages. All I can remember about the Stormlight Archive is how large the scale of this conflict is and how it was slowly opening up to another level. As the first book of an epic fantasy series, you would expect quite the heavy side of the world building, and the pacing may not be as fast as other works. I know it might be quite harsh, but remember, it is still a very solid series. But it just takes time for you to really enjoy it as like a very first book of a fantasy series, especially if you're a beginner. I will put this to this tier. Then I have a possibly lesser known work by Brandon Sanderson, Steelheart, the first book of the Licanius trilogy. I checked out this series in Waterstones and I was instantly hooked by the synopsis of it. Those who turn into a superhero is not the one that's going to protect you, but they are the tyrant. So it is like a dystopian, is that how I say it? Dystopian story about a group of rebels called the Licanius who want to overthrow these tyrants. On paper, the concept itself sounds quite nice. I love the take of this kind of rotten superhero. But because it is like a YA work, I just find the main character as a male is quite naive, especially towards the romance. Maybe another work on this tier. Sorry, Brandon Sanderson. Speaking of Brandon Sanderson, I forgot to put one book here. Let me just add a cover to it. How can you not have Mistborn, first book of the Final Empire trilogy? Like I said plenty of times on this channel, The Final Empire is the very first Brandon Sanderson series that I read and confirmed my love for this genre. Once again, it is about a group of rebels who want to overthrow the Dark Lord with a never-seen metal-based magic system. And don't forget the accessible writing styles and all those twists and turns you're gonna have along the way. I can easily put this on the highest tier. Finally, Brandon Sanderson, you are on top. We are now moving out of the stage of Brandon Sanderson and see other works by other fantasy authors. First of all, we have The Hand of the Sun King by J.T. Greathouse, the first book of the Pact and Pattern trilogy. It is an Asian-inspired fantasy that focuses on the young man who is torn between the ideals of the empire and his grandmother's forbidden magic that leads a rebellion against it. In the first book, we are like always in the head of this main character and going through all those tragedies with him. If you like this kind of narrative, you would like this book. It is definitely an interesting book that you won't feel overwhelming to start with. So I will put this to tier B. And I am also looking forward to the new work by this author in the coming November. Then this book is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Arlington, the first book of the Licanius trilogy. All I can remember is how much the world building is going to be expanded throughout this trilogy. The first book is start with a student of magic that's gonna be pulled into this conflict involving forbidden magic, ancient prophecy, and a war that could break the world. Like I said, this world is massive and you got so many discoveries along the way. And we also have a huge cast of characters coming from different fractions of power. Similar to the Stormlight Archive, it is not a bad series. just the one that you really need to pay attention to. So I would rank it the same as the Stormlight Archive to tier C. I mean, also look at how thick each book is in this series. They are all doorstopper. Ooh, finally come to a favorite of mine, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, the first book of the Poppy War series. I would say the plot here is actually quite straightforward. We're gonna follow Rin, how she gonna join this military school and discover her shamanic power. Later got pulled into this invasion from the... What's the invader called? I wouldn't say the world building is heavy here, but the plot could be quite difficult to read because of how graphic it could get. Rin, this main character, may not be everyone's favorite because of her choices and personalities. So I will put you to tier A. We have another Asian-inspired fantasy here, She Who Became the Sun by Shirley Packer Chan, the first book of the Radiant King duology. Same as the Poppy War, they both reimagine part of the Chinese history. This time it is about a peasant girl who stole her dead brother's destiny and tried to achieve greatness in her life. The first book I would say is quite heavy with the politics and warfare against the Mongolian Empire. If you like the Poppy War, I think you're gonna enjoy She Who Became the Sun too. So I'll put it to the same level. Looks like we're in an Asian-inspired fantasy streak here because the next one is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, the first book of the Dandelion Dynasty. Honestly, hands down, I can easily put this to the lowest tier. Once again, it is not a bad book, it is not a terrible series. It is again inspired by the Chinese history with what Ken Liu called the silk punk technology. The first book is still fine for me because I am quite familiar with that part of history. But gosh, the world building through this series is going to be so heavy. Just in the first book, you're gonna get a huge cast of characters who want to rise to the top of power in this unstable political climate. There will be so many things for you to process throughout this journey, especially with how this series grows. Also, Candice's writing style is really dry, and I do mean it. It is definitely a fantasy series that you need to be ready for it. That's why only the lowest tier will fit this book. After such a heavy one, we have a fun one, The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Ju, the first book of the War Arts Saga. It is a martial art inspired fantasy which is quite rare. I love the take of a chosen one who seems to fulfill his prophecy very unexpectedly, but that is not the case. I love all the companions we're gonna meet along this journey, all those lively fights, and there is enough political intrigue. I also think the writing style is also really accessible, so it could go up to tier A. Then we have a very classic epic fantasy, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, first book of the Wheel of Time series. Now, if we are just looking at the first book, I wouldn't say it is that bad. We're gonna follow a group of villagers who got swept into this world-spanning adventure where the Dark Ones is chasing, hunting them, and one of them is even a chosen one. This is such a very classic opening for an epic fantasy series. I actually read the first book twice, don't ask me why. Looking back now, the opening itself is still quite fun, still quite classic, but the pacing could be slightly faster. So maybe let's put this one to here. But of course, if we are looking at this series as a whole, it would definitely go to the bottom because it is going to be a very bumpy road, and you may even have like some slog in this series that you may not enjoy. But if we are just looking at the first book, let's be real here, it's going to be in the middle tier. Next is a very popular space opera maybe 1 or 2 years ago, Empire of Silence by Christopher Rothschild, the first book of the Sun Eater series. I just can't stand how the plot of Hadrian gonna keep on resetting, taking away things and elements that I started to develop my interest in. Pacing-wise, compared to other popular modern fantasy series, it is on a much slower side. And I think I'm not the only one thinking like this. So sorry guys, I have to put this on the lowest tier. I just can't enjoy it. We are back to Asian-inspired fantasy. This time it's inspired by Mulan. We have The Night Ends with Fire by K.X. Sung. I forgot what this series is called, but all I can remember is I didn't hate it, but I just didn't enjoy it. This book in the very beginning just feels to me borrows quite a lot of successful tropes from other Asian-inspired works, let's say the Poppy War or the Greenbone Saga. Later, we will be thrown into this love triangle. I think it is still an accessible, pretty straightforward book. Just personally, I don't really have much connection to you, even though I have finished it already. So it is definitely not as heavy as in this tier, so maybe here, if I remember what you are about, you could go to tier A, maybe. Next one is Dragon Rider by Tara Matharu, the first book of the Soulbound Saga. Like the title of this book, it is going to be about dragon. A boy from a court suddenly got drawn into this bigger political conspiracy and even bonded with a dragon. So he has to uncover and learn this new magic system, and a great destiny is waiting for him. I would say the political intrigue in the beginning is fun, is interesting, but how this story gonna turns out could be like lack of focus. Also, the pacing, especially with the middle chunk, could get quite slow. Maybe I need to put you to tier C. Then we have The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, the first book of the Library trilogy. Like its title, the center of the series is about a library where two unlikely protagonists gonna uncover the true nature of their world. Compared to other works here, this one is definitely a slow burn. It really takes time to develop the mystery of this library. I would say it is quite an atmospheric read, maybe here on tier A. I remember I quite enjoyed this book, especially if you read it in autumn. It would be like the perfect season to check this series out. Ooh, next one is my recent favorite, Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quintrell, the first book of the Echoes Saga, a self-published epic fantasy series that focuses on the conflict between light and evil. And this series can be further broken down into 3 separate trilogies. This series is great because it is packed with so many traditional epic fantasy elements, and the world building is really intricate, but don't worry here. The writing is really accessible, so you won't feel overwhelming. The first book is solid, and if we're looking at is it a good, easy start to a longer series, it can easily be up to tier S. I'm not sure can I put the next book here because at first it was advertised as a standalone, but now we got 2 more sequels that is set in the same universe. And I am talking about The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, the first book of the Roots of Chaos series. A divided world with different cultures, they're gonna face the rise of an evil dragon. If you tell me this book is going to be a standalone, I finish it and I'm good to go, fine. But now we got 2 more books that is set in the same universe. So I think the length of the first book is too long, too intimidating already. Even I feel like The Priory of the Orange Tree can actually be splitted into 2 volumes and make it a more consistent read. The first half, I would say we set the tone right. All those politics, all those adventures we may have, and you know that there's going to be some risk in this conflict. But the second half feels such a rush. All those character arcs wrapped so suddenly, and I mean the final confrontation ended in 1 chapter is a crime. If I'm honest here, I feel like the time and effort you need to invest in this series or in this book is not really proportional to the enjoyment that you would get. So unfortunately, I'm going to put you on this tier. Finally, we have a romantasy. We are talking about House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas, the first book of the Crescent City trilogy. This is another chunky book about a halfway who wanna investigate the mysterious death of her very close friend. Okay, to be fair, this book is fun. The romantic encounter and the tension is cute, always twists and turns, so you're not too sure the truth behind this murder. The build-up to the ending is also emotional. But before starting this book, I didn't know that I have to check out Echoter first. Now I'm 2 books into this trilogy and I can't start book 3 yet because of this reason. So I think I need to deduct some marks here. Maybe you're same as The Priory of the Orange Tree, tier C. Then we have another of my all-time favorite, of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, the first book of the Bound and the Broken series. It is an epic fantasy about a young man joining a rebellion against a corrupted empire. As a whole, I would say it is such a good series. I enjoy all the character arcs, all those events, all those twists and turns that makes you don't want to put this book down. It is just so good. But if we are just looking at the first book, I would say there is actually quite a lot of setup. It feels like all these characters we have, I know they are adult, feels to me they are in a baby stage in terms of the development. So when you are reading the first book, you may be thinking, why am I spending so much time here? But as you dig deeper into this series, you will appreciate this kind of setup. The writing here is similar to the Echo Saga, also really accessible. So if you're just looking at the first book, not the whole series, I don't think I can put it on tier S, so let's put it on A. Okay, next one. I'm not too sure how many of you have heard about it. It is the Judas Blossom by Stephen Iron, the first book of the Nightingale and the Falcon trilogy. It is inspired by the Mongolian invasion to Persia in the 30th century. We got Khans, prince, princess, spies, rebels, caught between loyalty, survival, and a rebellion against the Mongolian Empire. It is a shorter series in terms of its length, but packed with so many elements. I love this kind of writing where you can see how both the rebels and the Empire are doing, and also how quickly this conflict is escalated. I would say it is a solid start, still intriguing. One thing to note here is because we're gonna follow quite a lot of POVs, at least 4 main ones, but they are shared in this like really shorter fantasy series. So sometimes the pacing could feel quite odd. So let's put this on tier A. Then we have a book that I finished quite some time ago, and we are talking about Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, first book of the Farseer trilogy. Take my short review here with a pinch of salt because I finished this book maybe 5 to 6 years ago, so my memory don't serve me well here. A royal bastard trained to be an assassin and later got caught into the court politics. The pacing of this series is going to be on the slower side, and in a way it is more personal because we are feeling everything from our main character, Fitz. It is definitely not a story that's gonna be filled with joys. If we are just looking at the first book, and if I can still remember correctly, I will put this one on tier B, and I'm actually torn between A or B. Maybe after my reread next year, let's see, will my mind change? Another series I enjoy, Jade City by Fonda Lee, the first book of the Greenbone Saga, a gangster godfather-like fantasy that focuses on the business of Jade. To be honest here, I think Jade City is perhaps the weakest book in the Greenbone Saga. To me, how this series shines is how this family drama, family business, evolves over time for the ultimate emotional payoff. So the first book is more like a setup to the readers to introduce all the family members in this business. And the plot didn't really explode until we are halfway through. Once you get through that point, you will enjoy this series so much. Let's put it on the same level as Assassin's Apprentice. Then we have a tricky one, The Dragonbone Chair by Ted Williams, the first book of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. A very classic epic fantasy follow a kitchen boy in a castle becoming a hero in a battle against the evil. If I'm honest here, I read this series maybe a year ago, and at that time, I feel like this series is actually quite average. Like most of the 80s fantasy, I didn't really enjoy the pacing of this series. And similar to the Greenbone Saga, you really need to invest in Simon to reach a point where he can finally find his purpose, knowing what he needs to do and enjoy his growth. And don't forget how long this series is. It is a massive investment. So let's put it to tier C. Northern Left second last book is Promise of Blood by Brian McKellen, the first book of the Powder Mage trilogy. It is inspired by, how you say it, post-Neapolitan era set after a rebellion against a monarchy and a general needs to maintain social order, but there is a dark force rising. What I found so cool about this series is you got 2 magic systems. The one is the very classic elemental magic, and the other one is called the Powder Mage, where you can inject gunpowder to enhance your senses. There are political intrigues, conspiracy, and mystery in this book, and I don't think the pacing is that bad compared to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Thinking like this now, this is definitely a solid book. Maybe you can rise to the highest tier. It reminds me I can also check out other works in the same Powder Mage universe. Coming to the last one, also a book that I finished not too long ago. We have Breath of the Dragon by Shannon Lee and Fonda Lee, the first book of the Breathmark duology. This series is inspired by the one and the only Bruce Lee, as Shannon Lee is his only living child. So throughout this book, you can see quite a lot of references to him. We're gonna follow our protagonist, Xian, who wanna become the guardian of the realm so that he can restore his family glory by winning a tournament. As this book is co-written, you can see the strength of both authors. Shannon Lee's martial art background and Fonda Lee's character work. Maybe because this book is a YA, the pacing of this book is significantly faster than the rest on this list. And we're talking about jumping between scenes quite quickly. I think if this book can be slightly longer, leave some room for all those emotions to grow, it can work better. It is not a difficult read, but the plot sacrifices quite a lot, so unfortunately you have to be on this tier. So that is pretty much how I'm going to rank every first book of fantasy series that I have read, and I hope that this list can help you to pick up your next fantasy book. Don't forget, you can also share your own tier ranking list in the comment. I'm really interested to find out how you're gonna rate every first book you have read. Thank you for watching, guys. If you don't want to miss out any fantasy TBR wrap-up reading vlog, any fun ideas like this one tier ranking, make sure you have subscribed to my channel and like this video. I will see you all real soon. Goodbye.